based out of Malibu, California. Today's session is getting the most out of Odoo Studio as a techno-functional. And so one of the things I did this week as I was meeting different people around the conference is I asked them their thoughts about Studio. And it's funny, there were a lot of scary stories they had heard. Developers and partners would say, never use Studio, don't do it. And so in the spirit of Halloween here, I kind of wanted to put this out there that it's not so scary. It's been around for multiple version releases now, and it really is a good product to work with. And I'm going to explain in a bit some of the cases that are good for it and maybe the cases where you want to work with a developer. Some of the benefits to using Odoo Studio is that it's very cost-effective when you consider the alternative of hiring a developer or a team. Many of the clients we work with are anywhere from 10 employees to up to 200 employees. They may not necessarily need a lot of customization in Odoo, but they just need additional data, and they have some technical resources on staff that would be certainly adequate to get the work done within Studio. It's a very rapid way of extending the Odoo database. So one of the ways you can use it is for rapid prototyping, just to get an idea from your business stakeholders what they're looking for. It's also a way just to get your production up and running with some additional features very quickly. And then a very important distinction is that Odoo Studio is officially supported by Odoo during the upgrade process. If you saw the upgrade sessions yesterday, they talk about the fact that it's their responsibility when they're upgrading your database to get all of the Studio stuff working. So that is a big plus. Another theme I heard talking to people this week is they're on V13 or they're V14, and they're worried about the large project they have coming up because they need to upgrade a lot of their custom development work and their third-party apps. And with Studio, you can expect that upgrade process to be pretty smooth, whereas if you've worked with developers, you may not have access to them anymore. You need to find a new developer when you're trying to do a version upgrade. So I just want to point out the way I'm going to do the rest of this session. I've got a few more ideas on the best way to work with Studio, but for sure I'm going to get in and do some demos and try to show you a lot of practical content. So the way Odoo Studio gets enabled on your database is it's available to all administrators with the highest level of access. And so that's one of the things you need to understand. I've worked with a lot of businesses where sometimes the owner of the business or the executives want to be admins so that they have access to everything, but they may not be the most technical users, but they're very hands-on. And so maybe the advice to them is watch this video, learn about it. The videos from yesterday's sessions by Hiti and by Denise are also very good. Search Studio within the experience website, but start out with the simple stuff. And then if you do have technical people on staff who are willing to kind of get into the more detailed areas, it's a way that you can get a lot out of Odoo extension without going through major effort. So good uses for Odoo Studio, definitely anything data related, which is a big part of obviously a database, right? So everybody that I tend to work with has a need for a few custom fields. So whether it's on contacts or sales orders or employee forms, and Studio makes it easy to add those. You can add a variety of types of fields, as you've seen in the demos and I'll show today. But you can go even further. You can start to relate different records from one to the next, and you can even start new models, which is like a record type. So if you want to start storing entirely new records, that's easy to do with Studio. Studio also allows you to customize the views, especially list views, Kanban views, add columns, make certain columns optional. Report creation, and then also approvals workflow is used by a lot of my clients. And just, I feel like it's not covered all of the time, and some people might hear about Studio and go, oh, it can do everything. But I'm here to say, don't think you can do everything with it. You're certainly not going to go integrate with your e-commerce site using Studio. Some people might go into the form views of the existing models, and I don't recommend trying to change existing models. They'll go into a sales order and they'll try to move things around and change the tabs and everything, and it can cause challenges, and there's a lot of sophisticated functionality that the teams here at Odoo have built into those, so it's best to leave those alone and just use Studio as ways to extend and build on top of. And then finally, if you have a large, gigantic project and you think there's going to be a lot of Python code and a lot of custom code, it does not make sense to start with Studio. It makes sense to work with a developer and do a full project. So now that you understand what do I use Studio for in the best cases, here's some advice as well. Plan it out. Studio is still development. It's drag and drop, it's easy to use, but you are changing your database, the way it works for end users, so don't take that lightly. If you've heard from somebody in the organization what they need, maybe have a meeting, gather all of the business requirements, make some notes, get them to sign off on those notes, make a sketch. And then it's always important to consider the impact to existing processes and users. You might have a hands-on CEO that decides to go in and start making Studio changes to production on a Monday afternoon and causes complete disruption as everybody else is working and wondering where their fields went and why they got renamed. So it's definitely better to consider the impact on everyone. It's important to be safe. Because you are basically Studio is using point and click as a way to change code in the back end. I give the team a lot of credit. Maybe 3 years ago, there were times where Studio would run into some pretty challenging bugs, and you would want to revert to a backup. I feel like it's very stable now. They've made a lot of improvements, but I always have a habit. If you're using SH or on-premise, and you can take a backup. Well, you can take a backup on SaaS as well, take a backup. And then on those other two platforms, use a staging environment. If you're brand new to Studio and you're not sure if you know what you're doing, ask your administrator to get you started on staging. If you are a more advanced administrator and you're trying to put together a large project, go ahead and spin up a staging environment, try it out there. And if it is a larger project, staging is an excellent way. Sometimes the business stakeholders don't get it right. They feel like they understood what the end users might want. You build it up on staging, run some user acceptance testing. You might have some things you figure out there before you want to deploy to production. Related to that, again, it's development. So think about a testing plan. Don't just think about the happy path, as I call it, where the end user does exactly everything the way they were supposed to in the order that they were supposed to. Think about the idea of positive and negative use cases, meaning what happens if they don't put something in the field that you would expect them to always put in, or they're using poorly formatted phone numbers or email addresses, things like that. So do some testing. And then again, on the theme of rollout and adoption, just think about how many users are going to be impacted. And so maybe you need to try to roll out to production or do these changes to production over the weekend or in the evening when it's not so impactful. And so I wanted to show a quick example that we went through where the planning process didn't go well enough, and hopefully you can learn from this, is the client came to us and had all sorts of details about how they wanted to extend the CRM Opportunity record. They worked with companies with multiple locations, retail locations, so they wanted a sub-tab for location details and a sublist and key persons involved in deadlines and milestones, and we built it all out for them. And they said, okay, that's great. Now, when the opportunity converts to a sales order, we need all of that same information, and then when the sales order converts to a project, we also need all of that same information. And we go, kind of a facepalm moment where we go, we don't really want to recreate all of those fields again on the sales order and again on the project, and it feels weird to link from the project back to the opportunity. So if we had heard this big picture eventual plan that they wanted to get to, we might have done something like this diagram where we create a completely separate model that's called Project Profile, and then we just have links to it from the opportunity, from the sales order, and from the project so that they can kind of keep that project profile up to date as you go. All right, into the demos here. So the first demo is going to be entirely within the realm of Odoo Studio, and so that's why I've got the little caution level very low. This is highly supported Odoo Studio. The next demo is going to get a little bit into some calculated fields, but still stays right at that edge of green and yellow. All right. And so here's an example of a super simple sketch that you might have gotten from the marketing team. And they were saying, hey, we want to put together some promotional rewards for our customers, and we need a page where we can define a bunch of rewards and have a profile on each one. It's got a name, a status, description, and who the marketing owner is. And then on the contact record, we want to be able to associate one or many rewards, and we're going to ask the salespeople to fill that out. So nothing too complex. It's not a spec. It's just a sketch, but it helps to plan it out. And so because we planned it out, I'm going to go ahead and I'm in the Contacts app, and I'm going to go into Studio mode. And where I'm going to start in this case is I'm going to start with Edit Menu. And my first menu entry is just going to be a parent menu, and it's... okay. Merci. Do we have to... I think PowerPoint was taking over, yeah. Good? All right. So I'm going to create a new menu item, marketing, and this is just a parent menu. It's going to help me organize things. And I'm going to locate it right here. And through this menu area, I can also create my new model and get a menu item for it at the same time. So my first example here is rewards. It's going to be a new model. There's a lot of additional features I could add to my new model. This one's pretty straightforward, so I'm going to leave it as is. And so it's creating a menu item and the model in the background. I'm going to tuck it under marketing, and I'm going to create one more new menu, and it's going to be new model. And so I'm going to call it Rewards Allocation, and it's basically my model that's going to map rewards to contacts or clients. Same thing, nothing too fancy about it. Keep those as is. And I'm going to tuck this under the menu here. Okay, and so I'm still in studio mode, but we can see that my global navigation has been updated. I have a marketing menu, and I have my two new models. So I'm going to go to rewards, and it's showing me the list view, but in this case, I think it's going to be a little more useful to construct the model on the form view. So I'm going to click in there. The name I'm going to keep as is, that's defaults, and that'll be the name of the reward. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do like the chefs on daytime TV. I'm going to rush through this and make a mess, and then I've got one that's nice and done so that we can make a lot of progress here. So I've got one multi-line text field for the internal comments. I've got another multi-line text field for external comments. And then they also asked, could we have somebody that is the marketing owner? Many to one is the type of field when you want to link to another object within or another model within Odoo. And so depending on how you've set up your company, maybe some of your marketing people are not Odoo users, and so you could link to employee model. Or if you know that all of your marketing people are users, then the relationship can be to the users model. And so obviously I can put captions on all of these and clean it up, and you'll see that in the finished result. And the last thing to point out is on that sketch, there was talk about, hey, can we have a status for the reward just so we know if it's been approved by management or not? So I'm going to go ahead and click on Add a Pipeline Status Bar, and it gives me 3 default values, and I'm going to replace them. And lastly, I want to make sure that as anyone creates a new record, that these should all start out as proposed in the workflow. Okay, so I've pretty much finished up how I want to define the record for each reward. So let's move on and let's set up the rewards allocation. And in this case, I'm actually okay working in the list view. And again, this is just a model to link together my rewards and my contacts, and then finally we'll add it as a subtab on the contact page. And so I know that I need to link firstly to a contact. So I'm using my many-to-one. And then I also need to link to my reward. And also from the sketch that we had, remember that, or you might have noticed that they asked for each client, they have a couple of additional fields that they want to represent. How many of that reward is the client eligible for? What date should we deliver the reward to them? And a notes field. So I'm going to add those as well. And so I can add a date field. Again, I'm not even going to label them, keep things moving here. I'm going to add integer for the quantity, and then finally a multi-line text field. And also in this case, name was the default field, but we're really not going to name these connections, so I'm going to hide that by default. Okay, so I exited studio mode. I have the ability to go in and create records to define rewards. But now let's go into our contact detail page or form and also think about how are we going to set up those associations between the contact and the reward. So I'm going to go back into studio mode. And down at the bottom, I see that I can add another subtab. So I'm going to do that, highlight it, call it Client Rewards. And now that I've done my planning and I've done that work of associating the rewards with the reward allocation model, now I can use the one-to-many field type. Let's see. And I can drop it in here. And because of that association, the system recognizes that that record can be associated to contacts. And I imagine somebody might ask, hey, we know that there's this lines field type here. Maybe you could just start and drop that in here. The reason I didn't do it this way is because I know that I want, as the marketing team, to be able to access those list of line associations. I had more control over the naming, things like that. So this was a preference to go this way. And so with that, let me switch over and show a little bit of the finished product. So now I'm going to go ahead and click in, and I'm going to go into my rewards section, and we have some examples of rewards in here. And so I have a reward that's the holiday bottle of wine, an internal description, external description. I see that it's approved. And let's go ahead and go into the contacts record and see what the salespeople would see. Now you could roll this out to the sales team and ask them to start filling in the client rewards. You can go into edit mode, and you could see, oh, okay, yes, this customer deserves the holiday bottle of wine, and they'd be okay with just one, and they prefer red. They also qualify for summer sunglasses. And as I open the list, Notice I just have 4 items here. If you saw on that other list, somebody had proposed giving away a new car. That one hasn't been approved yet, so I was even able to set the domain on this drop-down menu to only show approved rewards and not canceled and not proposed rewards. And so let's say they're also eligible for catered lunch, and we'll do it for 20 people, and we'll do it next week. And no notes. And so this is great for the salespeople to work with, and then when it comes time for the marketing team to start planning those programs, they can come here to the marketing menu and to reward allocations. And here they can see the list of everything that's been set up on a client-by-client basis. And again, using Studio and the search view, you can even set what are some of the default group by options. So here I can group by reward, and if I want to see who all has been allocated for a catered lunch, I can expand that open. I can see which dates, and I can even see the total because of the grouping mechanism, is that we need to plan for 99 total lunches. Or again, the beauty of this extension, you could also group by date, by the date, and so you could do it by week or by quarter as well. So I feel like that's a very good use of using Studio and getting a lot of benefit out of it. And let's keep rolling on to the next one. Okay, so now we're going to talk about a conditions-based approval workflow. I'm going to run through quick and try to leave a few minutes for questions here. So I've got it borderline yellow, depending, different people will say, hey, as soon as you get into Python code, you have to be careful because you might get into code maintenance and upgrades. There's just 5 lines in a conditional field here. So I think it should be okay. But again, you should have qualified people doing this. And so in this scenario, this company actually has salespeople that can sell products, bicycles in this example. They can sell wholesale. And so if they have the right customer, they have the ability to change prices on the sales orders. But management has said, hey, we want to make sure that we don't ever sell below a floor price. And we want to keep orders from going through. So again, here's our kind of simple planning sketch. That if any one of the lines is below floor, then we want to make sure that the entire order is in error and does not move forward. And then as soon as they fix all of the lines, then the order should be good to go and move forward. And so let's hop back in. Let's see, I guess get out of that. And so I'm going to do my blend of some building and then show you the finished product here. All right, so the first place, obviously, to set the floor price is on the product. So we'll hop in. This one is very standard. We'll go into Studio. It's type monetary. That's all we need here. And let me throw an example value in here. Let's make it above cost. Another great thing about Studio is as soon as I brought this field in, it's supported for import-export. So it would be easy to take your list of products, do an Excel calculation, and say plus 10% on cost or minus 20% on sale price, and load it right back in. Okay, but where most of the work needs to take place is on the sales order. So I'm going to get into the sales order. I'm going to go into Studio. And we need to work on the sales line items. That's where the products are. So I clicked on the line items area, and I'm going to edit list view. And so the first thing I want to do is I want to bring that floor price value from the product, and a related field is the best way to do that. And so I know that it's coming from the product related record, and I can search on my floor price. And so we can see that one example of data has come in. And so then the other thing we're going to do is we're going to use a Boolean or a checkbox at this line item level so that we can have an evaluation of whether the unit price is above floor or not. So we're going to go ahead and put in a line item checkbox. And then from there, I also want to have 2 order level custom fields. So one of those I'm going to tuck under the other info tab. It's going to be one more Boolean or checkbox. And that's basically our flag that tells us, is anything on the order price below floor or not? And the other field that I want to add is really just a way to present the error to the end users and make it more visible. So I'm going to add a field of type HTML. And there's a nice spot where I can drop it here at the top of the page. OK. So at this point, this is the part of the demo where I'm essentially leaving studio mode, and I'm going to go a little bit into developer mode and just show a simple way of adding a calculate feature to one of these fields. So I'm going to settings, activate the developer mode. Again, this is for the qualified personnel. It's a way for you to kind of keep getting a little deeper into Odoo. And back at the main menu, I can search for fields. I guess I didn't get into it. The other trick is you can do debug equals 1. OK, and so now I can search for floor for the fields that I just created. And so I can find the Boolean at the sales order line. And so the piece that I'm going to do here, again, make sure you read up on the documentation. You know what you're doing here. But I have just a very simple Python script. And put it in here. It's following kind of some of the documentation down here, looping for record in self. And it basically is just checking if unit price is below floor price, set that checkbox to true, otherwise set to false. And then a best practice is to make sure that any field you've referenced in the script is listed as a dependency. So I'm going to grab these 2 out of here, put them in there, and now we have a calculated field. So what I'm going to do is just make sure that I can show some of this functionality in action. So I'm now in my completed recipe number 2. I'm going to go into a sales order, and I'm going to edit mode. And what I've done is I've left that checkbox visible just for us to see, but you would want to probably hide that after you're done with testing. It's not something your end users need. And so as I update this price to something below floor, we can see the floor is $629. I'm at $600. That box has checked. And then as soon as I raise it up to $650, that box is unchecked. Since we're running out of time, the last piece, I'll just show you that it's there, is that you don't really need Studio to do automated actions. There are ways to navigate to it through developer mode. But it is also easy to navigate to it through Studio by going to the Automations tab. And so what I have here are really just the 2 order validations that run so that we get a message at the top of the order. And these are really just opposites of each other. It's basically saying for any sales orders, whenever it's created or updated, we don't care about done orders, so just draft or sent. If any of the lines, let's see, I went to the wrong one first. If any of the lines have that Boolean as true, meaning it's below floor, then what we want to do is set the order level invalid to true, and then also just add some HTML into that HTML message so we get the feedback. And then it's also important that if somebody fixes the problem, to go ahead and set it back. So let's close out of that, and let me set below floor. And go ahead and save. And so you can see that I've got my message here at the top, that one or more lines are priced below floor. Also, I have configured a couple of the approval rules so that we don't want somebody to send out an email quote showing prices below floor. So even if they try to click send by email, I've blocked that, and obviously we don't want this order confirmed. And if they realize what they've done and they go in and fix that, we are good to go. And companies could decide whether they want to show the floor price column here or tell them to go back and check a spreadsheet that they've emailed out. So with that, I hope that that gave you guys really an excellent walkthrough of best practices for using Studio, planning it out, but then also some real hands-on examples of what you can do with Studio to improve your Odoo.